Hello and welcome back to the Purpose Over Profit podcast. This week we've got Karen Gibb on from Mind Marvels, and she works with young people basically in schools to support their positive well-being. So there's kind of 5 key areas that we get into on the podcast, and I guess anyone listening that either has kids or potentially you're already in education but you're looking for you're really passionate about mindfulness and the impact that it can have on kids. Well, Karen's business, and she is a former teacher, she's now working back in schools doing what she loves and promoting positive well-being with kids. So listening to this, there'll be loads of stuff as a parent I took out of this conversation, and I'm sure there will be for you as well. And she is also going to be looking at franchise out in the rest of the UK. So if you're maybe in education and maybe looking for something a little bit different, then keep your eyes peeled on go and follow Karen. I'll put all the links in the show notes, and yeah, enjoy the episode. Welcome back to the Purpose Over Profit podcast, and a happy new year. This is our first recording after the new year, and I'm delighted to welcome Karen Gibb from Mind Marvels to the show. How are you doing, Karen?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me on today. Pretty good. It's eventful 2022, hopefully.
Well, in a good way, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and as always, I've got Chris with me as well. How are you doing, Chris?
Very good, thank you. Looking forward to chatting to this about mindset and further education and kids as well, especially kids in a kind of area where are probably struggling in as well, which should be quite an interesting conversation.
100%. So, Karen, do you want to just give us a brief intro into, I guess, who you are and a bit about your business to start with?
Absolutely. So I'm Karen and I was a teacher. So I'm now a former teacher. I worked in social work and I worked in behavioural schools. Their term, not necessarily my term. But I was always really interested in kind of emotional well-being, and I loved working with young people. I've kind of always worked with young people in some capacity, whether that was in early years. My mum had a children's nursery for a while, and I also worked in youth work in Castlemilk in Glasgow. So I was always really, really aware of young people and mental health, and also aware of my own mental health journey. So when I was teaching, I always expected it to be a job for life, and then a couple of years ago, they changed the pension age to 67 for teachers, and that's just for just now. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought of how exhausting and how full on the job was. And I wondered if there was something else that I could do that could also help children still, but also in a more direct, positive way. And I kind of thought about maybe running my own business, but it wasn't really something that I thought, right, I'm going to run my own business. But now looking back, it seems quite obvious that was maybe the path I was going down, even if I didn't know at the time. So I decided to go on a couple of courses, learn a bit more about mental health, did my mental health first aid training. And the more that I learned about emotional well-being, the more that I decided this was absolutely what I wanted to do now and hopefully, for the foreseeable future. I started doing a few taster sessions at schools, just free kind of emotional wellbeing sessions. And eventually my business evolved into what it's known now as Mind Marvels. So Mind Marvels is emotional wellbeing support for young people from the age of 3, believe it or not, right up to late teens. We work in schools, nurseries, and one-to-one with families on Zoom. And what we always say Mind Marvels is that it's calming strategies and practical tools to help young people. And I find this so powerful, because I think if we had these tools as youngsters, how different or how many more opportunities would we have, as children, but also as adults as well. Because when you have that positive mindset, you really, really can do anything that you put your mind to.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a good intro there, Karen. We've gone right back to kind of. We've just closed the podcast there. That's I think one thing that really jumps out at me there though is I guess you've had this background of always working with youths and kind of being passionate about that. What was it that drove you to work or enjoy that? What was it about it?
I come from a family of teachers and social workers. Both my parents were social workers before, so I've always had that genuine ability or want to help people and have that empathy, maybe where other people don't quite have the same empathy for certain parts of society. I've always had that kind of underlying understanding from my own parents. I had a mum that was from a quite poor, if you like, background, and my dad from quite an affluent family. So it's been a real interesting childhood for me, because I've watched the struggles of two different mindsets around money, but also what that's led to is two very empathetic parents from different parts of society, which is then ingrained in me, if you like, that genuine compassion and help. So I think looking back now, we were always going out to help people. We were doing things for charity. We would go to on Christmas Day, we would go and help out in soup kitchens, if you like. My dad would volunteer at the homeless shelter. So there was always that need and that want to help people. And I think that's come really, really naturally to me. And especially starting this business, it is always that want and that drive to help others. And what I love about this is the information is so easy to learn. It's hard to maintain it, because habits, they take a while to form, and they take you to learn that habit and to continue that. But everything that I teach, once it's taught, it's free. It's mindfulness and calming strategies like breathing. We don't need expensive things to learn these. It's just that we can all learn these ourselves, and that's what's really powerful. It's not about if where you are in society or where you've come from. It's all about we can all do this together for the greater good of everyone.
I think even just, it's all fantastic. And even look at the stuff on the website just now. I like how simplified you made it when you look at the animal brain and you explain how the brain process works. We can talk our listeners through as well. But when you mentioned about the breathing exercise, it shows you the hand, and you breathe in when you smell the flowers, I think you say, and you breathe out, what's my note say? You blow out and you blow out a candle.
Yeah.
It's all making it really simplistic and going around your hand, and really you break it down into kind of baby steps, not just for the individual, but for the parent as well. Enjoy explaining that to our listeners about the animal brain, the process you go through as well. I found that tremendous when I looked at it.
Well, thank you. And that's the whole idea. It's I don't want to put something up online that's all about the amygdala and all the fancy names for the brain parts, because when we read that, especially, I'm not particularly academic myself. I got into university through clearing. I was quite a lazy student, if I'm completely honest. I didn't apply myself at school, and that's because I found the education system and the way that we teach children back in my day anyway, to be quite dull, and it didn't inspire me. So when I try to promote things, I try to help children and young people, I try and make it as fun, as interactive as possible. So what I always say is the brain is like a big computer, and we know there's tons and tons of information going in and out of there. We have three parts of our brain. We have the elephant, the meerkat, and the owl. Okay, so the elephant is our memories. So that's our hippocampus. So elephants never forget. That's why we use the elephant, and that stores all of our memories from what we had for dinner yesterday to our first day at school. So again, we're using examples that young people can relate to. Then we've got our owl, which is our prefrontal cortex, and the owl is our wise owl, and that helps us with all our clever thinking. And then the last part of the brain that we need to learn about is the meerkat, and the meerkat is the amygdala. So that's your fight, flight, or freeze response. And that's all about how it's our internal alarm clock. And when our meerkat jumps up and down, that's because our body is in that mode as well, and it's feeling that fight, flight, or freeze response. The owl, which is the wise part, flies away. And to bring back the owl so that all the animals can work together really well in the brain, we have to find calming strategies to calm our meerkat down. Now, if you're a teenager, I obviously make that a bit more age appropriate, but for a 3-year-old to come up to me in nursery and say, Karen, I feel my meerkat jumping, It just like, it blows my mind every time, because that child is then aware that they are maybe feeling a wee bit anxious or a bit worried or maybe a bit hyper, you know, and that's okay. But it's what we do when we have those feelings and how we can help regulate ourselves that is the most powerful tool that I honestly believe we'll ever learn. If you can regulate your emotions, or even understand, recognize, and then deal with your emotions as they come, like you can do anything. Because when you're in that heightened state of anxiety or stress, you know you're not your best self. You can't focus, you're not able to concentrate, you maybe aren't sleeping, you're not eating the right food, you're not exercising, you know, the list just goes on and on, as a child and an adult. So if we can pinpoint when we have those feelings and then have a calming strategy that works for us, it's unbelievable what we're then able to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and absolutely echo your point, Chris, just how simple it is. And I mean that in the best possible way, because
absolutely,
you jumped on straight away. I'm not one for the, talking about the I'm going to say it wrong here, amygdala. I always call it amygdala or something. But
they say it's funny in the US. What we think is funny, they probably think what we say is funny.
Yeah, but there's so many, most like motivational speakers, like me and Chris will both read that. I'm sure you'll be the same, but you come across the same jargon, the same kind of, we get overstimulus in terms of over information in terms of how the brain works. And actually what we often need is it takes more effort to simplify that and actually make it understandable to people. And that's, whether you're a child or an adult, actually, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. And I think we do overthink it, because we're humans and all we do every day is overthink everything. So when you break it down, I mean, I do get adults that say, oh, can you give me more information? I say, well, actually, this is all we need to know, because it's the strategies that then help us the best. We can learn all about the brain, but that doesn't mean we're going to find something that's going to make us calm. It's more about just understanding that when that meerkat or your amygdala starts the alarm system, that you then have a calming strategy or a practical tool to help with that regulation. And I'm very clear with this that it's okay to feel all our feelings. Like, I'll often hear people, and I was a teacher that would say this as well, calm down or don't be so angry. But what is that actually telling a child or a young person? Like, you're saying be calm, but how can children be calm if they don't have those tools already to feel that calmness?
Yeah, or don't be angry, the projection that actually it's wrong to feel anger.
Yeah.
Whilst from an emotional point of view, there was something when you were speaking earlier that it's not possible for us to think that we will never feel all of the emotions in our life. They will happen to us whether we've got tools to deal with them or manage them or not. We're going to feel them. We're going to be sad. We're going to be exhausted. We're going to be angry. We're going to be joyful. So all of these feelings are going to come at us at our life at some point, and therefore how do we best manage them is the only kind of approach that we can possibly have. We can't avoid feeling sadness, going through bereavement or trauma. These things will happen to all of us to a greater or lesser extent. So yeah, I absolutely agree.
I think for me, I'm quite like a candid person. Like, I'm really honest. So I was in a high school yesterday talking, and one of the, we were in a small group, and someone was talking about bereavement, and then, somebody else, it was like all the pupils had experienced death to some degree in their family. And I said, well, I still have, anger about certain things that have happened in my life. And the kids were looking at me like, well, but you've got this business, you've got all these calming tools. And I was saying, but I still have to go through that process the same as everyone else. So even though it becomes a habit to learn these calming tools, you still have the emotions, you still have to fight through sometimes the negative thoughts that creep in, and I wish I could wave a magic wand sometimes and solve it, but it's not. It's that process that we all have to work through, even as children and as adults. And I always implore to families and to parents to talk about this with your children and to say, Dad's feeling angry today, he's going to go and take 5 deep breaths. Like, model that behaviour, because I think sometimes we want to hide that from children because we don't want them to feel that we feel angry, if you get me. But actually, children want to know that it's okay to feel angry. It's then what we do with that anger after that's the most important part.
I think that's really interesting because we're going through a process just now with my own family and my daughter at the moment. I don't mind sharing this. We're going through a process just now where we know she's on the spectrum of some sort, but we're going through that process of dealing with anger and dealing with flare-ups as well. And we've realised that saying calm down, don't get angry doesn't work. So we started to explain to her, we've done meditation. We explain to her when we're feeling upset and angry, and we have a discussion about it. So when she says, Dad, I'm starting to get a bit angry, we'll go away and we'll talk about it, we'll sit quietly. So starting to put those principles in place. But what I really liked was you mentioned about the human brain, the animal brain. You said you'll tailor that towards the kind of teenagers as well. So what I'm hearing a lot there is it's about human connections, it's about understanding what works for the individual. See, when you mentioned about being younger and going to these soup kitchens and doing this and that, you're helping individuals here, seeing them at an empathetic level and understanding and a compassionate level as well, what works for them and how you can help them. And it sounds like you've taken that learning from a kind of a school kind of experience, which probably I read as well, that even though they're teaching them stuff, they don't really get a chance to learn. I seen you quote as well. So I get that, where you've learned that the human connection is probably it's not as important teaching, but you don't get the time, I guess, to really involve them and make them understand. And is that really why you wanted to start your business, to try and help and guide them as much as possible, or was there another passion you had for starting it? Because it sounds like obviously your mum's had a successful business with the nursery, and you must have taken some experience from that as well.
That's actually really interesting. You're making me think here, Chris. I'm a bit of a rebel, if I'm honest. So looking back, I didn't quite fit into the square box that I was maybe expected to as a teacher. You know, I would ask the kids to call me Karen, and I was quite informal with them, whilst I know a lot of teachers would like to have like the formal name and to dress quite well. But I always wanted to get to that level of the children that I was working with. You know, some of those kids came from homes where they were sleeping on a sofa, they didn't have a bed, you know, and for me to go in and ask them to, you know, call me Miss Gibb or whatever, I just felt that wasn't going to quite reach the same level that they were maybe working at. I didn't really want to have to be an authoritative figure, if I'm totally honest. I like working with people one-to-one on the same level, and authority can work to some degree, but I think I'm more about building connections rather than trying to insert discipline or be a sort of bigger authoritative figure. So yeah, I guess my mum having a children's nursery probably did inspire me to some degree. I hadn't really thought about that, so that's an interesting point. But I think I was never going to fit into teaching and the restrictions that it held. And don't get me wrong, I totally admire teachers. Like, I have the biggest respect for them. It is an impossible job at times, like the amount of admin. But I think I was getting bogged down with the paperwork, with the expectations, rather than letting myself build those connections and those relationships with the pupils. So I think from that respect, that definitely was missing, and probably part of the reason that I did start Mind Marvels.
Yeah, I think that there's probably a couple of insights that I'd have from that. I mean, how you've described it, it almost feels inevitable that you did end up moving into the business world, because I guess that authority was restrictive, and you've got a lot more autonomy now, although with that comes a lot more responsibility and hours, I'm sure, and pressure. But yeah, certainly a lot more freedom, autonomy to kind of do it your way. But I'm also kind of really curious you touched on it, saying maybe there's a place for authority, but actually it got me thinking there around certain like industries or places in work where young people will be going out inevitably into the workplace. And I'm going, apart from potentially the military, I'm trying to understand where authority is genuinely helpful in the workplace. And I'm struggling with any other. It would be good if either of you kind of think of otherwise, and just wanted to curious to get your thoughts on it, because I certainly felt restricted, and probably for about 15 years in my corporate life, moving out of school, that I had to behave in a certain way if someone was my boss, or certainly never disrespectful, but I always felt intimidated. I always felt lesser, and I was really conscious of that hierarchy. And I guess some of the ways that you're talking about, like call me Karen, dressing the same way, you're trying to break down some of those, subconscious barriers that I think certainly I felt I took out from school into the world, and took me a long time to be able to get rid of them.
Wow, No, you're so right. I'm not a big fan of authority. I've actually read an amazing book, which even if you're not a teacher, I would recommend. It's When the Adult Changes, Everyone Changes, or Everything Changes. I'm not quite amazing at remembering the titles. It's is it Paul Dix? I think it is Dix. Amazing book, and that's all about breaking down, like, not interested in suspensions, detentions, rooms where kids go and sit in a corner, which is actually really common, and I'd say more so in England. They have these rooms with little like booths where children have to go when they're punished. What baffles me today is we still have this system in schools where children are punished. They're not allowed to have extra golden time. They're not allowed to go out for playtime if they misbehave. And in my view, we have many different definitions of misbehaviour. I'm not a big fan of that word either, but we have, so many children. Kind of, Chris, you touched on maybe that your daughter is on the spectrum. We have so many little personalities in classrooms. We have so many children struggling with their mental health, with what's going on inside their bodies and their heads, and what is misconstrued as bad behaviour could be something else entirely. And that really frustrates me, because I don't believe that children should be punished, or they should be made to feel like their teacher is that authority figure. And it's a really fine balancing act. It really, really is. To do with workplaces, it's funny you would say that about like kind of going into corporate, because when I'm working in a school, if a head teacher asks to see me, I still get that feeling. And it's not that I've done anything wrong. They just want to have a chat and see how I'm getting on, or maybe talk about a pupil that I'm working with. But I still get that sinking feeling that, oh, what have I done this time? It's really funny.
You sound like you can't get similar backgrounds, Karen. You sound like very rebels. I was a rebel at school as well, by the sounds of it. So there you go.
I mean, honestly, you said, Chris and I both meant to, I don't know if you're aware, MCR Pathways.
I know.
It's the mentoring programme, but I'll go into school and I see that the head teacher there frightens the life out of me still. So I'm just like, when you're talking about that, I'm like, oh, I've no idea how I would deal with them now if they asked to have a word with me, let alone being a youth.
Isn't it funny though? But I'm just taking on two employees this month, like just to help me with like admin and social media. And I've said to them from the start, I'm like, please just come and see me. If there's anything, you need to talk about, I'm here. Don't feel that you can't speak to me about anything. I've been very open, and I've even said to them, this is my first time employing someone, so I'm not going to get this right, but I need you to help me get this right. So if there is anything that maybe you need help with, please come and see me. So I've not gone in pretending that I know everything, and that because I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to fail at things, and that's okay. But it's about getting that right together with those employees. I want them to have that positive experience with Mind Marvels. But I know it's going to be, there's going to be things that don't go to plan, but there's also going to be things that go smoothly.
There's real vulnerability and confidence in that. And I know sometimes those words don't go together, but I truly believe, like, to be really vulnerable, you have to be confident in who you are as a person, which it feels like you are in that sense, but that breaks so many barriers down. I think often that hierarchy position feeds our ego, and that's where we draw our confidence from. And actually it's like, well, no, if we were vulnerable, that somehow shatters it. I had to step out of the corporate world to actually understand that and do some work on myself, like, because of that. So I guess coming back, like we were talking about initially around the brain and how you describe, I think, likes of the meerkat. I think Chris and I will be familiar with the chimp, like our chimp playing up, but I love the meerkat. Like it's such a more playful, analogy, I guess. I love that. So what are some of the ways that you would say, when you're going into schools, what are some of the kind of key ways that you would help children, I guess, what are the key tools that you would put into their toolkit, I guess?
So Mind Marvels base all the sessions on the 5 steps to mental well-being. So every session has these 5 elements in it, and it's learn, move, connect, mindful, and be kind. So every time I go into a school, I'll always do the 5 steps. And what I love about that is it's not asking kids to sit for half an hour doing mindfulness or yoga, which are great and have their place. but it's short, snappy activities for young people. And I think that's what works so well, because not everything works for every child. And that means that at least one thing they'll get from each session, because there'll be something that'll be relevant to them. So the first part, learn, we talk about the brains, we talk about the Meerkat, and we talk about our emotions. So if it's younger children, I'll maybe have I've got some emoji stars with, different facial expressions. We'll talk about them. If it's older children, we'll talk about, if it's, young adults, we'll talk about scenarios, things that maybe happened that maybe did surprise them or make them feel angry, etc. Then we move on to move, which is our mindful movement. So this is like little fun exercises that young people can do. One that's really powerful is the little kind of cam button. So just in the palm of their hand, they just push in with their index finger, and what they find is a little like cam button, and this is a little kind of point in the body that sends lots of lovely chemicals around, and it's a really kind of relaxation. For younger kids, we call it the hug button. So mum and dad can also press this during the day if the youngster's at school, and it's a little connection to home. So again, just age relevant. And then we move on to connect. So connect is when we do our kind of massage. So for older kids, it'll just be like a hand massage, or they'll kind of on the arm. If it's younger kids, they'll do massage on the child in front. So they'll usually just do it on the back, fully clothed. And it's a really nice way actually of asking for consent as well. So we always ask first, is it okay to give you a massage? And when I first did the training for this, I was a bit like, this is a bit strange and a bit like out there. But actually, the more that I do it, the kids love this. Like, honestly, they adore this because they always get to ask permission first. So it's that introduction of consent to children. In the world we live in, with what children can access straight away on a phone or a tablet, we need to have those boundaries in place around, touching and what's appropriate and what's not. So straight away, they always ask. If the child says no, absolutely fine. They can either do it by themselves or just watch everyone else. And this is a really nice way of kind of building trust within the classroom, or endorphins as well, which releasing lots of lovely chemicals again. And what's really lovely is parents and children, like their children can do it together as well. And then we move on to breathing as well. So all our breathing strategies have got a big breathing ball.
Sorry, Karen, I'm glad you picked up on like when you first started it, but I thought what you were going to say was you came across some resistance from the schools in terms of potentially bringing that type of thing in. That's where my head initially went, and I went, that's fantastic that you get to do that, because I've never heard of that ever coming in. And
yeah,
my love language is touch, so like, I'm forever like. I've got sore legs and stuff. I had the fascia gun. It's a Christmas present for me, but my wife's like, I was like, it's kind of a present for you because it saves you having to go, oh, because you're on my shoulders, or my legs sore or whatever. But I could imagine in the school place that would be, I don't know, but my assumption was that would have been difficult to bring in. But
and especially the kind of nation we are, I don't think we are like, unless it's someone you wouldn't really hug someone, or we are quite reserved, I think. I actually found more of a resistance from parents who hadn't really understood what was happening. So kids would be going home and saying, I was massaging. It's like, so, straight away as a parent or an adult, you're like, what's this? But once it's explained, totally, once it's explained and they can see it, then, and I always send the information out anyway, so parents are aware. But what I do like about it is that there's no expectation that children will do it. It's all, and that's what's powerful, because how often at school do you really get a choice about what you do as well? You go into school, you're told this is the lesson for today. You go into a mind marvel session and it's all about, well, if you want to do it, that's great, and that's powerful too.
I think just listening to you, because obviously kids are very tactile, they like to play with stuff, especially with lessons, I guess it depends on what you're teaching. So I know primary 6 and 7, I think it changes a lot. Up to primary 5, it's basically learn through play as well, as much as possible. My daughter has every day of the week, they'll have one day of the week they'll be outside, outdoor day, and they'll be learning, doesn't matter, snow and rain, whatever, they'll be doing stuff with their hands, we'll be building dens, whatever else, it's all about that. So I can understand that transition. between massaging as well, and kids like that, a bit of playiness as well, a bit of fun as well. I think that is really nice. It'd be interesting. How does that work when you go to an older age, like for teens and stuff like that? Does that transfer?
Even like P6 and 7 can be like a bit of an iffy period, because obviously it's kind of start of puberty and kids are a bit more aware of like themselves. I always encourage them at that age to choose a partner in the class. So usually it's with a friend, and some of them will say, I don't want to take part, and that's fine, and they're quite happy to do it themselves. If it was an older age group, I've actually done it with adults at training. That is so awkward, by the way. But I kind of like it, because again, they still get that choice. But once they get relaxed into it, they're actually like, this is really good. But for teenagers, I tend not to go down that path. I just say, let's do self-massage. But if it was a group that had done it from primary school and it was right up through secondary, I don't think it would be such an issue. But I think going from teenagers into that, like into massage, would probably be quite a strange experience for them. But again, I do leave it open, and I do encourage it, but I wouldn't want to make them feel, too uncomfortable or uncomfortable in any way. It's good to push the boundaries. And even with like the breathing or the other two steps, mindfulness, and then gratitude and affirmations at the end, even those are big steps for older kids, especially, because to stand up or to say in a room your affirmation, I am loved, or I am grateful, that's a big deal when you're a teenager, like to say something like that. So I don't really enforce it as much. They tend to just do self-massage at that age.
I think I'm just intrigued, because obviously with the way society is going just now, don't hug, don't high five, don't touch this, sterilise your hands, do this, do that. And obviously you're trying to break down that barrier to point by saying we need to do something a bit more tactile, we need to do massage, we need to get that human connection again, because we're slowly losing touch with that, I feel like, because the way we were working. And even kids in school, for a point, when they all went back after the first lockdown, it was all like, yeah, don't play, keep your distance and all this kind of stuff. And the kids need that as much as possible. So that's why I'm encouraged to do that. I think that's fantastic. Sorry, Dan, you want to say something?
No. I wasn't. And I pick up on that. Like, I guess there's certain restrictions, less so from kids, that's enabled you to be able to put that in place. But like, you're absolutely right. Just that we don't hug each other. We're not like, we are a little bit, whether it's different, as culturally it kind of feels like it's different, like, or different shades of grey across the world. But certainly, like, we always joke, my wife's not a hugger whatsoever. Like, her side of the fact, like, it was not the done thing. So like, with my mum and dad, I hug my dad, I hug my mum, and like Jill would be getting a big hug when she first met them, and it's like that was a bit uncomfortable. But it's lovely that you're saying, you're recognizing that you're not making teenagers, you want to push the boundaries, but you don't want to put anyone in a position where they're uncomfortable, because they've been ingrained in a certain behavior up to that point. And being a teenager, that can be a little bit, taking myself back there, that can be a really difficult time. But you're actually working through with kids at a younger age to try and break down some of that resistance at an earlier age. So like you said, if they came through, that would be a lot more normal for them, because they're used to that practice in a safe environment, and that does feel normal to them.
Yeah, and I would be naive to think that I could go in and suddenly teenagers would be absolutely fine with that. But what is great about the self-massage is that that's something they can take away anyway. So they're still learning a strategy that they can then, because you're not going to have somebody always at home being like, oh, can you just rub my back for me? So if they can learn like sort of hand massage and things, and they're still taking away strategies that they can use themselves anyway. So it's win-win regardless which strategy they go for.
You even mentioned affirmations, which is fantastic. So is that up to connect? When does affirmations come in? Is that the connect stage? Or is
that's the be kind. So that's the last part. So after connect, we do mindful. So that will be like their relaxation, lying down or in a seat, the kind of relaxation. But then we've got be kind. So the be kind part is when we just finish the session.
I love this one. This is fantastic. I absolutely love that you finished a session with be kind.
Oh, absolutely, because it's so important. And a lot of people think that be kind is always about maybe them about other people, but actually a lot of it is about being kind to ourselves, because the way we talk to ourselves, we would never speak to someone else like that.
I was actually just off I'm a transformational coach or a growth coach, and I do some property mentoring, but I'm off a goal setting workshop, and we spoke about this very thing, about the negative self-talk.
Oh,
and
you
one
would get
of
a
the
punch in the
participants
face?
actually said, I would like punch myself, and like I would punch that person in the face the way I speak to myself. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? That's how we like. So there's that recognition, that awareness, but yet that self-talk kind of persists. And I recommended a couple of books, which I'm sure you might be familiar with. There's Tara Moore, Playing Big, which is focused mainly on females, but this Inner Mentor and Inner Critic. So the inner mentor is this kind of wise, maybe owl-like, from bringing that analogy, but like dragging you to the place that you want to be, the person you want to be in the future. The inner critic is this, for me at least, is this drill sergeant type, putting me down and, telling me I'm not good enough and I've got to do better and I've not worked enough hours and da-da-da-da-da. And sometimes I need the inner critic. The inner critic drives me sometimes to do. So I don't want to eliminate them, and nor is that even practical. But to be able to stand and say that is just them, create separation, that it's just a thought, it's like, and characterize that and be able to, create some distance and say, that's not welcome right now, because actually I want to be doing this over here. You're not helping me for this moment, and to feel empowered in that moment. And the other one was The High Five Habit. I'm about halfway through Mel Robbins. Or audiobook. And I love Mel Robbins because she's kind of like, it was kind of like she was 40 before she started to even started on her motivational journey. And it was all based upon like a load of tough stuff happening before then, like, and failure after failure after failure. But this idea of giving yourself a high five, being kind to yourself first and foremost, is like the most, like, it's the longest relationship you ever have with anyone.
Oh, absolutely. I actually listened to her on the High Performance podcast, and I thought she was amazing. She did, it was an amazing episode. And I did high five myself in the mirror the other day, and I still had that sort of cringe. I don't know if that's ever going to go away though. Like, you're just like, you can do this.
I know, especially in Scotland, right? Or the west of Scotland as well. But I think I'm day 2 now into it. So I'm day 2 doing the high five challenge. She says like do it for a week. So.
Yeah, the other one that's a really good book is Atomic Habits. James
Clear. Brilliant.
So I don't know if anyone has done this, but he's got like one of the biggest mailing lists in the world. So when you sign up for it, you get like 30 days of habit forming. So I think I'm only on day 1 just now, but that was all about, instead of saying things like, I want to be fit, it's like, I want to be the healthiest version of myself. So have your goal is actually the person you want to be rather than what you want to do. And I thought, wow, that's really powerful, because we all want to be healthy, we all want to lose weight, we all want to be nicer people, but what is the actual end goal, and then work from there backwards.
But that's why I love this Be Kind. So I've got a note here around, obviously it's being kind to yourself, but I've seen that you see the best in others, and that's partly what you teach about kindness as well. So that's going a step beyond what you'd expect in the classroom. It's saying, yeah, be kind to yourself, but also look at the best in others, because obviously I've got kids at school, and Darren's kids at school as well, and kids will have troublesome times when they come up against either stronger-willed kids or even bullies. And then it's starting to step back and go, right, understand they're either bullying me, they're unhappy, they're angry, but why are they angry? And starting to understand that and unpick that. And if you can do that at such a young age, it's going to benefit your future in life when you become an adult, and then you get your own business, or you go into business as well, because you've got that empathy and that understanding. And then you'll hopefully be able to high-five yourself in the mirror when you're like 22 and not feel that cringiness at all. And that's kind of what we're hoping to try and do, is how to help transform the next generation, the generation after that, to be more self-loving and actually appreciate the world a bit better as well.
But do you know what's so daunting for me about that is, I'm hoping to have a family in the next couple of years, and see, because I know all this, I'm almost a bit overwhelmed. Like, I've got that child is going to be like some sort of mindfulness prodigy, because I have to get them high-fiving themselves every day and affirmations and gratitude because I've got to practice what I preach. But I just imagine like knowing all this at a young age and how powerful that would really, really be for them. So,
and there's probably something in there as well, like with knowledge like that does come a lot more responsibility or pressure, I guess. I certainly feel it, as a coach, like finding that with young kids, and like I still have like my Meerkat still jump up and down from time to time. I'm sure it was this morning, probably half an hour before our episode, first day back at school. There is an element of kind of being kind, again, coming back to being kind to ourselves and recognizing, like, there's all very well, like, awareness is a big thing. So you're bringing that awareness. You're also helping people experience it as well, which is really useful. So they've got a deeper understanding of how to use those tools. Sometimes, like different times of our life, I guess some people will pick things up and be able to use some of those tools earlier than others. And that's absolutely fine as well. It's like, you know, the fact that you've got that awareness, it's latent, it's almost an asset that you're creating for our young kids to pick up when they're 18, when they're 50, when they're 75, you know, they've still got that toolkit because you're giving them a tool that, and giving them some experience with those tools that they can use at any situation kind of in the future that they deem appropriate.
And I think what's difficult about it is you can't always measure wellness. Like, you know, if I was like a dance teacher going into a school, you would see by like the kids and how they're performing in the school show or something, you know, you can see their ability. You won't always be able to recognise when that young person, instead of, you know, doing something violent or maybe, you know, having unkind words to somebody, they might just do some deep breathing instead. You can't always measure that. And that's almost a shame, because I think this is so impactful and it's so needed, but you don't always know the actual impact, and you won't know because you're right, it could happen years down the line. One of the little girls came into, I was doing kind of 8 sessions in a school, like one a week, and she came in on the last day and she said, Karen, I fell off. I just love this. They think it's so cool because they can see, you know, my name. It's not Miss Gibb, it's, you know, it's Karen. So Karen, you know, you're a real person at that point. Karen, I fell off my bike last week and I didn't know what to do, and I started feeling panicky, and then I just pushed in my little cam button and I started to feel a lot better, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. And I told the head teacher, because they need to know this, they need to know that it is working, but it's not always, you know, straight away, or it's not always being able to measure. And I think in a school, in the school environments that we're in, everything is always about targets and monitoring and tracking and making sure kids are on the right path and the right level for their age, etc., etc. And this stuff can't always be measured, and I think that's an important takeaway as well.
Because we've obviously spoken around the tools and the solutions you can put in place, but I guess what you've just explained there is some of the benefits that come out of this, which we haven't really covered, because you've obviously explained there they feel calm. I've got a note here. I've got a note of some of the benefits, and obviously I've got here increased resilience, which I thought was fantastic as well, because I work with a bereavement charity. They talk about building up resilience within people with grief as well. And for somebody at that young age, you wouldn't really imagine them building up resilience. You think they'd be a sponge just taking stuff on. But what are the other kind of benefits that young people can get from actually working with Mind Marvels?
Absolutely. So our values in the business are to make a difference every day. Always be kind, which relates to our last segment of the Mind Marvel sessions, and then educate with empathy. So for young people, I always think that they will come out with more empathy because they'll be aware of kind of more about what's going on around in the world around them. They'll also be aware that when people have, there's a really good example I've got where I've got a little emoji that's got a shocked face, but it's also could be a surprised face. And I always say to young people, you can't always tell how someone feels by looking at them. So don't always expect people to know how you're feeling. And that's where that importance of talking. So communication, again, improved communication, improved resilience, improved sleep. If that young person is able to do some breathing to then relax them, to then be able to go to sleep. The communication for me is everything though, because if a young person can communicate or talk about how they're feeling, then that it's just a knock-on effect for everything else in life, because we all know that when we talk, we feel a lot better about it. And also for school, then it's improved attainment at school, because that concentration levels up. They're therefore easier and more willing or able to learn as well. So many benefits, and I don't see any disadvantages.
So I think we opened up, but if this type of thing was available for us, I think we'd all be like, I would say I would be a lot less inhibited by this view of authority and going into the workplace, which I wasn't really aware of for like 15 years or something like that. So there you go. I think we would all be in a better place because of it. So
I think just quickly, actually going back to your values as well, we spoke about this, Darren, you mentioned this as well about the corporate world, about how we feel, and that's the danger of values as well. Sometimes we feel we've got to shoehorn and fit in towards a set of values or behaviours, and then because, I remember the organisation Darren I worked in, some of the values were like service, efficiency, sustainability, like bloody hell, what does this mean? And then you've got to have this big description to explain it all, where yours are more natural, more easy to understand. And actually, if you're going to join an organisation, you want to look at somebody's values and go, I'm the perfect fit for that. And you just fit seamlessly into it as well. And that's where I love your values are really simplistic. I say to clients, sometimes having 5 values is too much. No more than 45 is a lot, but 3 is a lovely number. 3 is easy to explain.
And I can remember them. I remember looking up people's values and going, I don't even know, like integrity is a great word, but everyone's using it and I can't always say it fast. It takes a bit of time to say that word well. And I thought, why am I trying to put myself in a box? Why don't I come up with things that actually I'll always remember, but also are really close to me and my nature? Because Mind Marvels, it's me for now. It's everything that I'm always about. And I think, educate with empathy is the perfect one for me, because I've always had that empathetic nature. Therefore, it feels natural. I've always wanted to help people, but also I'm very aware of like my own mental health struggles. So as a child, I was very hyper, very confident, but also very anxious underneath that. So for me, that's been a bit of a struggle because I haven't always appeared like that. I've always been very confident, but underneath that, there was that kind of crumbling self-esteem, or there was maybe those big doubts. And I think for me, it's all about just being really honest and being kind with that. And we kind of touched on this earlier, that you have to just be, for me it is authentic, because I have to be honest, because if I can't lie. First of all, I'm a terrible liar. Second of all, like, we shouldn't lie anyway. But thirdly, for me, it's not natural. I have to just speak my mind and be honest. And that's a really, really important trait for me that then goes into the business too.
It's humble. It's this element of humility in there. When you talk about empathy, yes, you're in a position where you want to help. There is the teacher and student kind of relationship, I guess. But actually, you want to break down as many of those barriers as possible. And I think the nice thing about what you're saying is that, and I think we've all got it, like, to a greater or lesser extent. Everything, if we can arrive at a point where we are enough as individuals and we understand that we're enough as individuals, then it's okay to show people both our flaws and scars and all the stuff that's not nice about us, as well as all the stuff that we know we're really, really good at. But often we've kind of come to the realization we've got to hide all of this stuff. And it's wrong. If we've got a flaw, we need to hide it. If we've got a scar, we need to hide it. And, that travels right through into adulthood. And it's so wrong. So all of those things, it's really lovely that you're talking about your own struggles with mental health and recognizing this confidence exterior and this vulnerability and anxiety that you've got underneath, and sharing that to kids to say, look, if you feel like this as well, that's absolutely fine. Both of those feelings are okay.
Mm-hmm. I actually wrote on my about me page on the website about just a little snapshot about being anxious myself, and I put it on and I took it off and then I put it back on, and I was worried about what schools would think, and would they think that I was unstable as a person. And then I thought, no, this is authentically me, this is who I am, and I can be more empathetic and more understanding with children because I have that anxiety myself. And that was a bit of a turning point for me, because I wasn't sure whether I should disclose that. And I know a lot of people feel like that in their workplaces about their own mental health. Should you talk about it? Should you appear normal in inverted commas? And I think actually the more we talk about this and our own emotional well-being, the more normalised it becomes, and there's much less of a stigma than there was before.
Yeah, right, actually, because I don't know if it was over the holidays, actually, just before then, my wife and I watched, I don't know if you've seen it, Paddy McGuinness done a piece on...
Oh, I've not seen it, but it looks really good.
He's got, is it three children?
Yeah,
three children. Autism, some with different variations of autism. This is why I thought it was really interesting when you talked around your background to do with autism and ADHD and all this kind of stuff. And he was explaining the autism scale, you've either got these geniuses that can like work out numbers in 5 seconds and at the higher end of the spectrum, or these people that are just so that they can't work in society at all. And his kids are somewhere in the middle, but nobody talks about that. And he was talking about his struggles, his anxiousness. He didn't want to be telling people about it. He spoke about how he's clinically depressed, and he was like, it doesn't make sense. I've got all this money, I'm doing really well, and he threw himself into work. But he talked about that struggle, about how it was his inner struggle to accept his kids and understand what's going on. It ended up being that it turns out his wife's got autism, but she didn't know that until, sorry, spoiler alert, but she didn't know that until she went through the journey of going through this, and she turns out that she had all these traits when she was younger. So I find that interesting when you talked about your own anxiousness as well, because you're opening up that vulnerability to other parents and the school as well, to say, not that you've overcame this, but you're learning as you go. And this is probably the one thing we mentioned about it, about making mistakes. So I've just finished the Tom Shoes book, Blake Mikowski, is it? Just finished his book. He talks about the best leaders in the world all make mistakes. They learn from it as well. The people that face the biggest adversity will come out and be more rewarded. If you start a business with lots of money and all this money behind you and backing, they're the businesses that fail. It's the ones that have the struggle. So it sounds like you're putting your struggles out there, your vulnerability, and that can only help you grow.
I think you're right. And I think when people buy from people, don't they? So they're not going to buy from Mind Marvels if it's a big faceless brand and they don't know who's behind it. They don't know the why of the business. They don't know the struggle that's going on behind that or the educational background of the business either. So I think it is about being brave, being authentic, putting yourself out there and bearing all as long as you're comfortable to do that. And even if you're not comfortable to do that, sometimes pushing yourself to do that can be the best thing for you and how you feel in life in general.
Yeah, really thanks for like sharing that, like particularly around this anxiety and not putting on your website about me or not, because what an amazing message that sends to people to say it's okay to have flaws. Like we should all feel that, but we don't. We hide everything. We've got a filter for absolutely everything to make us look different and better in some sort of way. So I love that. I love the fact that you're kind of brave enough to have that vulnerability shown. In terms of the business then, in terms of like where you see it going, we've kind of glossed over it because I love this. Both Chris and I have just dived into like the science and like how you help. And it's been amazing to go through that. I guess we forget that, I mean, your business, you've been full-time since what? Just last year?
Yeah, so I actually gave up supply teaching. I did supply teaching for a couple of years, a couple of days a week, just to kind of tide me over. So I gave that up in June 2021, which was amazing. It's amazing to say I'm a former teacher now because I actually let go. So I now am full-time in the business. In terms of where the business is going, we're actually franchising the business this year. So there'll be lots of like mini Mind Marvels all around the UK, but I'm really, really looking for people to take part that are, have that genuine interest in mental health, probably former educators, to keep the business in line with my values and where I want the business to go. And I'm really, really excited for that because that allows more people around the country and more children to learn all about, the 5 steps and how Mind Marvels can really impact lives for the better.
Amazing. So if anyone's maybe listening to this, that's maybe been in education, kind of been passionate, I can't think why anyone that would have been in education that listened through this would have anything but positives from this episode. But how can they get in touch with you?
Really easy. So I'm Mind Marvels, one word, on all social media. I think we're on every platform. That's been a bit of a struggle, but that's a whole other podcast story. Keeping up with social media is just, chasing your tail, but also just mindmarvels.com as well.
We haven't asked guests this very well, but I think it's quite a nice thing. So obviously it's called Purpose Over Profit, but what does that mean to you personally?
I have been dwelling on this, and it's a bit like the High Performance podcast when they asked the question at the end, and I was thinking what would be my answer. I mean, for me, the purpose is really clear. So our vision for the business is to empower young people to create the best version of themselves. And I think my purpose is just to help as many children and young people as possible. And I've started to look more at like my charitable side of things because that kind of went to the side when I started full-time in the business. So For me personally, I'm on a kind of a women's crisis board as a volunteer board member in Glasgow, and then I'm also Mind Marvels donated money to the local food bank here, and it's something that I want to keep pushing and definitely find a more charitable route for Mind Marvels, where somehow we maybe give a percentage of profit, or we maybe donate more of our time to charity, because it's the best feeling ever, and I don't think I had really appreciated it until I was able to, hand a check over and say this is from Mind Marvels. It's such a good feeling to give back to the community, and I really do believe that the more good that you do in society, the more it comes back. Absolutely.
I think that's fantastic. It sounds like obviously that purpose and that vision you've got around young people, it sounds like it's expanding to not just be young people, but to adults and to former teachers or teachers, to give them an opportunity to try and step out of that restrictive framework to a point, and then to have that autonomy to live their own life and actually help as many people as well. So that sounds tremendous.
Thank you.
It's interesting when you feel the pressure, like you've got to give back, and listening to you and the impact that you have on young people, like you are, like you are building assets, you're creating assets for them that they can take up. I love assets, like from a monetary point of view. That's why I kind of talk about that word, because I'm in property. But having an asset that can pay you back, not financially, well, it could financially, but having assets that you can take right throughout your life is just such an amazing gift that you're able to give. So, it's amazing that you're not only doing that in around Glasgow at the moment, but being able to franchise that across the course of the UK is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited for the future. It's been a long journey, and it's going to be even longer, but I'm just so excited. Like, I just love entrepreneurship, and I feel so lucky so fortunate. Not luck, it's not luck, it's you make your own luck, I think, sometimes, and I feel so fortunate to be in this position where I am effectively my own boss, with a clear vision for the future of myself and Mind Marvels.
It sounds like we hopefully get you on in 2 years' time. We can talk about the mini Mind Marvels taking over the world at some point as well.
Absolutely, and franchising is huge in Australia as well. I used to live in Australia, so I'm like, yep, let's get a trip out there as soon as this COVID stuff kind of eases down, and get out there as well, because they love franchising out there, especially children's activities. So that would be really exciting as well. Watch this space.
That's incredibly, like, what ambition you've got there as well. Like, love it, absolutely love it. Good stuff. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great to have you, Karen, and I guess wish you all the best across the course of this year and into the future.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real insight, and genuinely had lots of questions and sort of insights in my own business from you guys. So I appreciate all the info and the chat today.
Thank you.
As always, thank you so much for listening to the Pop Pod this week. If you'd like to leave a review or share the podcast with others, then that'd be awesome. You'll find us on Instagram at the Pop Pod, and on Facebook we have a community group called Purpose to Progress that anyone can join. And we'll be back every Monday with a new episode, but until then, stay on purpose, and we'll see you next week.